Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Jim Macleod, and we're going to be talking about his new book. And his new book is called The Visual Marketer. Jim, before you introduce yourself, I want to say I really enjoyed it because you're a designer, and I don't know anything about design. And what you do in the book is you've taught me all about design. So I see things completely differently. So I have said to you that the book has changed my life. It has changed my life because I see things differently. Right. Now you can say, where can people find you?
Yeah, first off, thank you for saying that. It means a whole lot. I can be found all over the place at Jim Macleod, most social networks. I am at Jim Macleod, jimmacleod.com. Book.jimmacleod.com is where people can find the visual marketer. And it's anybody can that's read the book, it can feel free to reach out to me and ask any follow-up questions.
As I said, I really enjoyed it. I mean, as we were saying before we went live, there's some things I kind of know about design, which I've picked up as we go along. But what it does is it basically brings them together, explains a whole bunch of things that I didn't know. But also it does it in a very, very simplistic, you know, way, which I think for any marketer should read it because I think there's a certain amount of incremental gain in terms of, you know, you're not saying you need to be doing marketing differently. You're saying what you need to be doing is doing marketing the same way you're doing it, but here's a way to make you a little bit better. Would
Yeah, the book was written for marketers and it's not written for designers. And what I wanted was marketers to kind of know the basics of design if they don't have that background, that formal education that I had had or the years of experience. Because marketers are being expected to do more and more on their own these days. Whether it's generative AI or Canva, they're just kind of given the tools and say, go create something good. And good is the best that they're getting because they don't have the basic foundations of design. So this book hopefully tries to lay that out for them.
and in terms of the inspiration behind it, that's really what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah, because a couple years ago, I started a newsletter. Once I saw the rise in AI, I started a newsletter called After Design, which was to help designers learn how to adapt to an AI world because AI is going to consume some of their jobs and they're going to need to pivot into different careers. And then all of a sudden I realized that all those jobs that are going away from designers, all that work has to go to someone and it's going to the marketers. So now that the marketers are expected to do more with less, and now they're expected to be designers too, they don't have the proper background or foundations for it. So this book teaches them that.
So you talk in the book about it being a crash course in terms of design. What three skills would you expect marketers to walk away with from the book?
The main things that people need to understand about design is visual hierarchy. So, what's the first thing you want them to see? What's the second thing? And then what's the action you want them to take? Once you figure that out, you can know how to size your pieces, your elements, and get people to actually pay attention to what you want. Another way to focus on that is make sure your alignment and borders are correct. Whenever I'm reviewing designers' portfolios, I'm looking for spacing and alignment just to kind of see where things are positioned on the panel or on the page to see do they understand proper spacing? Are they too close to the edge of the screen? And because if they are, then that means that they don't really understand the basic foundation because there's a grid underneath everything. And if they understand the grid, if they understand how to move people's eyes around, that really helps. And then I would say the third thing would be typography and color. If you know how to properly use typography and color, you're going to be able to get people to move through the document or the asset the way that you want them to.
Because you talk, don't you, about in the book about how people actually look at the screen and the eye moves, and you talk about actually what you're trying to do is make it easy for the person, aren't you?
Yeah, because people are basically inherently lazy, right? Like they don't want to spend a lot of time and effort looking at your ad. If they can't see it right away, they're just going to keep on scrolling or skimming past whatever they're looking at. So you want to make it as easy as possible for them to consume and understand what's going on. So a lot of times what you need is just to create that kind of brand essence, those brand visuals so that people immediately understand it and they don't have to think about it. Think about the McDonald's golden arches,
Mm.
right? The yellow M on a red square or circular background. You know that instantly. We no longer even need the word McDonald's underneath it because they've done such a great job branding that visual identity. So now there's a shortcut. And anytime people see that, they can kind of skim by it because their brain already knows what they're looking at. And then they can get straight to the message and then to the CTA.
And and when you talked about McDonald's, we all in our heads went do 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 do, didn't we?
Yeah, and they've actually and that's an amazing thing that I mentioned in the book is they've actually taken it a step further and they now have audio associated with it. And some different brands have that. Netflix, Law and Order. So, there are different things that have an audio brand as well.
So, what are some of the mistakes that people are making?
Make the logo bigger is something that, we often hear and joke about. But the problem is when something is laid out properly and everything's properly placed within the grid, and somebody says, make that element larger, it can throw off the complete balance of the asset. And now all of a sudden, you're confusing people and they're not sure whether they should look at your headline, whether they should look at your button, whether they should look at your photo when you have elements competing with each other because you just want to make everything as big as possible, then that creates tension. And like I said, people don't want to pay attention to that sort of stuff.
Mm. Any other mistakes that people make?
Yeah, there are a lot. Even in a block of text. So I worked for a book publishing company, my first job out of school, and knowing, what your paragraph of text looks like. How many hyphens do you have? You don't want multiple hyphens in a row. You want to watch out for rivers, which are just kind of thicker spaces that tend to move through because what will happen is as your eye is scrolling across, you can slip down to the next line because something that river is pulling you down. You don't want one word at the end of a paragraph or one line at the end of a page because people that could use that as a jumping off point and it looks unbalanced.
And you also talk in the book about kerning, don't you?
Kerning, yes.
So
So one of
you
the
actually talk about that when you know about kerning, it ruins your life.
yeah, one of the best things I saw was if you hate somebody, teach them about kerning. So sorry for anybody that's read that, including you, Tim, because now all of a sudden you will start to see. So kerning is the space between letters, and some typefaces are set up properly so that a capital A and a capital V, like in the word save, will sit properly next to each other. They kind of slide into each other. But in most typefaces, especially the free ones that you find online, they don't sit within each other. And what happens is you end up with almost a space in the middle of your word. And so once you see this and start to understand it, you will see it everywhere. And it's a fun party trick, but it'll start to annoy the people around you. And you're like, that's bad kerning and that's bad kerning.
So we couldn't have a podcast without talking about AI.
Mhm.
So in an area of AI generated content, there's a lot of people. I can go to Canva and I can get templates, which are good enough.
Mhm.
Um, what is it that we can be doing that where we could actually, because we have a debate internally about AI enables us to be average.
Yeah, because AI it's a complex guessing machine,
Yeah,
right? Like it's just kind of guessing what you want next based on a ton of information that it's already ingested. It's not actually drawing conclusions and creating new information. So what happens is when we're using AI for layouts, for images, it's kind of giving you the average of what it has ingested up until that point. And knowing that, that means you're never going to get to great if it's just giving you the average of what it's seen in the past.
yeah, and moving from average to good. I mean, you talk in the book. There's a whole section, isn't there, about various technologies that you can use from Canva, which is okay, right
Mhm.
through to some of the text. You've been using Adobe for 30
Close
years.
to 30 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just wanted to get you to say it was 30 years.
Yeah.
You know,
Very
so
close.
you know the tools, and I thought that was a really great resource in terms of if you don't know and you want to get involved in it, what sort of tools to actually use.
Yeah. So I break it down in the book where I kind of have consumer grade tools and pro level tools. And Canva's a consumer grade one, and Canva does great work. Initially, I was anti Canva, just like anybody with a design background would be. But then the more I started to learn about it and understand how it empowers people to make their own designs, is really kind of changed my mind. And then actually, when I talked with the folks at Canva, that helped me too, because they taught me that basically what companies should do is hire a professional designer to set up all their templates, set up their colors, set up their logos, their typography, and then lock those areas down so that the average person within your business isn't going around and like, well, I want the button to be over here, or I want the logo to be up over here, or I want the logo to be giant. If you can lock that stuff down, basically put in the guardrails to protect people against themselves, then you can create better outputs with Canva. Because the problem is everyone loves to be creative and they want to do something different each time. And that's actually bad for your brand. Your brand needs to be consistent, right? Like we said with McDonald's. And if you have marketing managers changing their Canva templates to whatever they feel like every single time they're creating an asset, one, it takes a lot more time, money, and effort. And then two, the audience, it takes them more effort to identify what they're looking at and kind of because they first need to identify what it is they're looking at before they can even get to your message.
Mm. You talk about visuals being both memorable and effective. How do you get a balance?
It's so the way I look at it is effective means getting people to take the action you want them to take.
Yeah.
Are
You
they
talk
clicking
a
on your
lot about in the book, don't you, about saying what is the reason for the image?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you're not just making things look good.
Mm.
Like the whole point of design and marketing is to get people to take an action.
Yeah.
And if it's more brand marketing, then you're looking for it to be memorable so that you can make an impression in their mind so that when they do need that product or service,
Yeah.
you are top of mind at that point. So what you want are visuals that are, for brand marketing to be memorable and performance marketing to be effective.
And you talk also about the in the book about how different layouts get people to take actions in different ways and using different terminology to get people to take action.
Yeah, there's a great example in there. I think it's Roadblocks that was offering two different versions of a of an update, and they basically had one page that had 20% off buy now, and it had all this kind of information, and another simple page was like here's the product, here's the buy now button, and that version performed better than the one that had the
The one
20%
with the
off.
discount.
Yeah, because it was simple. You weren't throwing everything at the person. There's a great quote that says, "Design it's not about what you can add; it's what you can take away, because you want to take away as much as possible and still be effective." And so that's why, like the book cover, there's no image on the book cover.
Mm.
It's the title, the subhead, my name, and the forward by Mark Schaefer line. That's it, because I didn't want to distract people with it. Like, here's what it is, here's how it'll help you, and here's who it's by.
Yeah, and I've seen I've seen, and I can't remember whether it was in your book or not, where buy now buttons are instead of saying buy now, it says start your journey or something like that. And
It
just by changing that terminology, it gets a different response.
Yes. Yeah, so it's that you can do different things to try to encourage more people to get active with what you're trying to do. It once it turns into a choose your own adventure type thing, it kind of activates a different part of the brain where it's like, oh, this sounds like fun. This sounds like something I want to do rather than now I have to buy money. Now I have to spend money in order to buy this product I need to solve the problem I need. They, it's the whole nobody wants to buy a drill bit. They just want a 3/4 hole.
Mm.
Like it's get them to the solution faster, and getting them excited about that is a better way than just give us money.
I'm interested when you wrote the book. Um, did you discover anything that you didn't know before?
Yeah, chapter 2, the science of seeing. It forced me to go deeper on things I had learned way back in school and throughout the years,
Mm.
where I actually wanted to get more into the actual biological aspects of how people respond to things, or how babies are just trained from within a, you know, immediately after birth to identify faces
Yeah.
as a safety area. So there's a lot to the biology part that I hadn't known in the past. There were things like you don't want more than 12 words across in a line because you don't want to tire out your readers as they're reading. You know, you don't put, nobody's read a book that was on, you know, 8.5 by 11 or A4 paper. I'm sorry, I forget what it is in the rest of the world. But nobody reads that far across on your entire page, which is why books are smaller because you don't want them to get tired. So I knew that sort of stuff, you know, how people, how people consume the information, but I didn't understand necessarily the biological impact of how people, like, there are micro reactions to people's faces when when they like or dislike things.
Mm,
And it's completely biological. We have no control over it. Our body just reacts in certain ways.
mm. Yeah, when I wrote my last book, I was told by the publisher to write as few words with capital letters.
Hmm, that's
Um,
interesting.
a- and um, and it's interesting now because now I know that, and I look at people because the classic thing about PowerPoints, or when you're doing titles, say if you were doing a title of a blog on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
what you do is you write it in with capital letters, each of the
Right.
words. And actually, we as readers, we don't like that
That's good to know. I hadn't heard that,
because
but it makes sense.
as you know, we're lazy, and what we've done is that we've actually got more lazy. Um,
Mhm.
and one of the great things about your book is that you've got loads and loads of diagrams. So one of the other things that when I signed the contract from my third book, I had to put in, had to put in 45, had a contractual commitment for 45 images.
Wow.
Whereas in the first book that I wrote, it had 8.
Okay.
And that's the difference and the change in the way that the reader, people are reading it and they go, oh, there's an image, right? Okay. And it's a way of trying to keep them. And you've got loads of diagrams and stuff, and it keeps you.
Yeah, I had over 100 images by the time I was done, and but, when I was writing, it was easy because I would just, like, put in an image for this. But then once I got to the end, I'm like, "Oh, man, now I've got a lot of images to create."
Yeah. Well, I ended up going to somebody in on Fiverr and doing it all for me.
Nice. You know what?
Um,
I heard somebody from Fiverr for one of my diagrams where I talk about, you wanna stand out, but you don't wanna stand in the wrong crowd. So what I did was I hired somebody that made, like, death metal logos for, like,
oh yes,
Swedish death metal bands or whatever, and I had them make a logo for Goldman Sachs in that kind of, like, red and black and swirly type style to as an example of, like, this is not where you wanna be.
I remember that. Yes, and it's got like blood dripping off it on the yeah. It's really
Yeah.
um. So in terms of what should you recommend that this book should be read by marketers? What sort of things do you think that they are they actually going to get from it?
I think a better understanding of design basics. And so what the design is interesting where you only know as much as you know, and you can't see kind of bad design above the level that you can see at. It's really an interesting thing where, and obviously I've been doing this for a while, so I look back at my old stuff and it's like, how could I ever think that looked good?
Hmm.
But it's because I didn't know it back then. And I've talked to marketers about this too, where when I start to educate them about design, all of a sudden they start being like, oh, that thing we made last month, we made this mistake here. Or, and now all of a sudden they won't be making those mistakes again as their design intelligence improves.
Yeah, and as I say, my I'm not a brilliant designer, and I'll never will be. But I've learned an awful lot by reading your book. And as I say, I highly recommend it, and it has changed my life.
It, that's impressive. Thank you.
As I said, I do look at design differently, and and
There
I,
is Yeah,
and
I
I
was gonna
think
say there's so much bad design out there
there
that
is,
once you start to identify it, it's like, oh, it's everywhere.
uh,
So
and and
then
and
oh,
more
go ahead.
importantly, it's about recognizing what's good design, and then going, "Oh, that's good design. Oh, yeah, I like that."
Mhm. Like I said, there's so much bad design out there. And then once you start to be able to see that, it makes it much easier to recognize the good design. And then when you're making your own designs or instructing somebody to make those designs, then you know the direction you want to go in. And it's not just a make it pretty group.
So have you got a copy of the book there that you
I
can
do.
hold up? So where could we get a copy of it?
So it's available on Amazon right now. And it's also available on my website, jimmacleod.com, or visualmarketer.co will bring you to the page with all the additional information about the
And
book.
and I'm just going to say this. So Macleod is spelt Macleod.
Correct. Which is why I registered visualmarketer.co because McLeod's challenging for anybody that isn't from Scotland or Canada.
Yeah, yeah. Jim, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. As I say, excellent book. I have the best job in the world. Not only do I'm able to read great books, but I'm also able to talk to the author and ask them great questions.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you for the time. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jim. Thanks.